The second day began with the aliens attempting to regain control of the situation through overwhelming force. Marcus watched through his scope as additional ships landed during the pre-dawn hours, disgorging more soldiers and advanced equipment. The aliens were clearly frustrated by their inability to complete a simple relocation operation. From his concealed position, Marcus observed the new arrivals with professional interest. These aliens were different from the initial force, larger, more heavily armed and moving with the particular alertness of elite troops. Their equipment included advanced sensor arrays and what appeared to be powered armor systems. Someone in the alien command structure had decided that the sniper problem required specialized solutions. Marcus had expected this escalation. His military experience had taught him that conventional forces always responded to guerrilla tactics by bringing in more conventional forces. It was a predictable reaction that often worked against armies that relied heavily on technological superiority and standardized tactics. The new alien commander was immediately identifiable by the deference shown by other troops and the elaborate crest on its armor. Through his scope, Marcus could see that this being moved differently than the others, more cautiously, with constant awareness of potential threats. This was a combat veteran, someone who understood that technology alone would not solve their problem. Marcus made his first kill of the day 30 minutes after sunrise, eliminating a sensor technician who was attempting to deploy surveillance equipment on the settlement's water tower. The shot was taken from 1,200 meters through a gap in the morning mist that lasted only seconds. By the time the aliens responded, Marcus had already moved to his next position. The new commander's reaction was swift and professional. Instead of rushing troops toward Marcus's estimated firing position, it ordered a systematic sweep of potential sniper hides while keeping most forces in defensive positions. The aliens began using drones to scout terrain features, making Marcus's movement more difficult, but Marcus had spent the previous evening preparing for exactly this type of response. He had pre-positioned equipment caches at multiple locations, allowing him to operate from positions that the aliens had not yet identified. More importantly, he had prepared several surprises that would demonstrate the creativity humans brought to warfare. The first surprise was sprung when an alien patrol approached one of Marcus's abandoned firing positions. They discovered what appeared to be equipment left behind during a hasty retreat, a damaged rifle scope and some camouflage material. The aliens examined the items carefully, trying to extract intelligence about their opponent. The improvised explosive device hidden beneath the fake equipment cache detonated as the aliens leaned in for a closer look. The explosion eliminated 3 soldiers and wounded several others. More importantly, it demonstrated that the human sniper was thinking several moves ahead of their tactical responses. Marcus used the confusion following the explosion to eliminate 2 more targets from an unexpected angle. The aliens had positioned Overwatch teams to cover the approaches to his previous firing positions, but they had not anticipated that he would circle around to engage them from behind. The psychological effect of these tactics was beginning to show. Marcus could see through his scope that the aliens were moving more cautiously, spending more time checking their surroundings and less time focused on their primary mission. Fear was a force multiplier that worked in favor of the outnumbered defender, but Marcus knew that time was not on his side. The aliens would eventually bring in enough resources to saturate the area with sensors and soldiers. His ammunition was limited, and he could not sustain this level of operation indefinitely. He needed to force a decisive confrontation on terms that favored his particular skills. The opportunity came when Marcus realized the aliens had made a critical error in their deployment. They had concentrated their forces around the settlement's central area, leaving their landed ships relatively lightly guarded. The ships represented their transportation, communications, and command capabilities. Without them, the aliens would be stranded on Kepler with limited options. Marcus spent several hours observing the ship security arrangements, noting patrol patterns and identifying weaknesses in their defensive posture. The aliens were clearly more concerned with protecting their personnel than their equipment, a mindset that came from operating with technological superiority in conventional conflicts. The approach to the landing field required Marcus to cross nearly a kilometer of open terrain in daylight, past multiple sensor positions and roving patrols. It was the kind of movement that military doctrine would classify as impossible for a single operative. Marcus smiled as he began his approach, remembering that impossible was just another word for something nobody had figured out how to do yet. The key to the approach was patience and an understanding of alien behavioral patterns. Marcus had observed that the alien patrols moved in predictable cycles, spending more time in areas they considered tactically important and less time in areas they classified as low threat. By moving only during specific windows and using micro-terrain features for concealment, Marcus could remain undetected. It took him 3 hours to cover the distance to the landing field. When he finally reached his objective, Marcus found himself within 50 meters of 3 alien spacecraft, including the command vessel that had arrived that morning. The ships were guarded, but the guards were focused outward, watching for threats approaching from the settlement. Marcus planted his remaining explosive devices on critical external components of each ship: power couplings, communication arrays, and engine systems. The charges were small but precisely placed to cause maximum disruption with minimal risk of explosion that might harm the colonists. This was sabotage, not terrorism. The devices were set with timer delays that would give Marcus time to reach a safe distance before detonation. But before leaving the area, Marcus decided to send the aliens a message they would not forget. From his position near the command ship, he had a perfect shot at the new alien commander, who was standing in the ship's doorway consulting with subordinates. The range was only 200 meters, but the shot required careful consideration. Killing the commander would disrupt their leadership, but it would also announce Marcus's presence at the landing field. He would have only minutes to escape before the entire alien force converged on his position. Marcus decided the tactical advantage was worth the risk. He lined up the shot, compensated for the minimal wind drift at such short range, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth motion of long practice. The alien commander collapsed instantly, struck by the heavy rifle round before it could even register the sound of the shot. The other aliens in the area reacted with shock and confusion, unable to immediately identify the source of the attack. Marcus was already moving toward his planned escape route when the explosive charges detonated in sequence. The first explosion disabled the command ship's power systems, plunging its interior into darkness. The second destroyed the communication arrays on all 3 vessels, cutting the aliens off from any reinforcements or higher command authority. The third eliminated the engine components needed for atmospheric flight, effectively stranding the alien force on Kepler. The aliens responded to the sabotage with desperate fury, sending every available soldier toward the landing field. But Marcus was no longer there. He had anticipated their reaction and positioned himself to observe their response from a concealed position 800 meters away. Through his scope, Marcus watched the aliens discover the extent of the damage to their ships. Their agitated movements and obvious distress told him that his sabotage had been even more effective than he had hoped. Without transportation and communications, the aliens were cut off from their support network and unable to complete their mission. More importantly, the balance of power had shifted. The aliens were no longer occupying forces with overwhelming technological advantages. They were stranded soldiers with limited resources, facing an enemy who knew the terrain and had already proven his ability to strike at will. Marcus began the final phase of his campaign. Instead of continuing the hit-and-run tactics that had characterized the previous fighting, he began a systematic siege that would force the aliens to abandon their position entirely. He contaminated their water supplies with harmless but foul-tasting agricultural chemicals, making it impossible for them to use local resources. He disrupted their supply lines by eliminating any alien who ventured beyond the central settlement area. Most effectively, he began a campaign of psychological warfare designed to break their morale. The aliens would wake each morning to find evidence that Marcus had been in their camp during the night. Equipment moved, personal items rearranged, and messages left in languages he had learned during his military service. The messages were simple but effective. "You killed my wife. Leave now or die." The campaign continued for 6 days, with Marcus applying steady pressure while avoiding direct confrontation. The aliens grew increasingly desperate, trying various tactics to locate and eliminate their tormentor. They sent out hunting parties that never returned. They attempted to negotiate through the colonists, offering to leave if Marcus would show himself. Marcus moved through his home with the systematic efficiency of a soldier preparing for battle. Every item he selected had a purpose, every decision calculated to give him the maximum advantage against an enemy that outnumbered him by an impossible margin. From the hidden cache, he retrieved more than just his rifle. There were night vision scopes, range-finding equipment, camouflage paint, and other tools of his former trade. Most importantly, there were the detailed topographical maps of the region that he had created. During his first year on New Haven, Marcus believed in preparation, and he had mapped every ridge, every draw, every possible firing position within 50 kilometers of the settlement. The aliens were making their first tactical error by keeping the colonists in the central square while they waited for transport ships. It gave Marcus time to work, and it concentrated his targets in a predictable location. They were thinking like occupiers, not like soldiers facing an asymmetric threat. Marcus changed into his ghillie suit, the specialized camouflage that had made him invisible on a dozen battlefields. The suit was designed to break up his human outline, to make him blend into whatever terrain he chose for concealment. He added local vegetation to the suit's attachment points, making it specific to Kepler's ecosystem. Before leaving the house, Marcus took one last look at the coffee cups still sitting on the kitchen counter. Sarah had filled them both that morning, expecting him to join her as always. The sight of them sitting there, cold and abandoned, threatened to overwhelm him with grief again, but grief was a luxury he could not afford right now. His neighbors were in danger, and he was the only one with the skills and equipment to help them. Marcus pushed his emotions down into a locked compartment of his mind, the same mental discipline that had allowed him to function during the worst moments of his military service. The aliens had made their second tactical error by not conducting proper reconnaissance of the area before landing. If they had, they might have noticed the carefully concealed observation points Marcus had established during his years of hunting the local wildlife. These positions had been chosen for optimal fields of fire and concealed approaches. Marcus selected the position, known as Overlook 3, a rocky outcropping approximately 2 kilometers from the settlement that provided excellent visibility and multiple escape routes. The approach required crossing open ground, but he knew the timing and patterns of the local wildlife well enough to move undetected. The journey to Overlook 3 took Marcus 45 minutes, moving carefully through terrain he knew like his own backyard. He paused frequently to observe and listen, using skills honed by years of operating behind enemy lines. The aliens had posted sentries, but they were watching for conventional threats. They had no experience with a human sniper who understood that patience was the most important weapon in his arsenal. At Overlook 3, Marcus began the careful process of setting up his firing position. He tested wind direction with a handful of dust, calculated range to multiple targets, and identified the best escape routes should his position become compromised. The aliens in the settlement square were approximately 1,847 meters away, well within his effective range. Through his scope, Marcus could observe the aliens more clearly. The tall gray-green beings appeared to be the primary military force, with the blue-skinned beings serving in technical roles and the reptilian species acting as overseers. Their equipment was advanced, but Marcus noticed they relied heavily on energy shields and directed energy weapons. Most critically, he observed their behavioral patterns. The aliens moved with the rigid discipline of a highly structured military organization. They followed protocols precisely, which made them predictable. They also showed little awareness of their surroundings beyond immediate threats, suggesting they had limited experience with guerrilla warfare. The alien commander stood near the center of the square, easily identifiable by its elaborate armor and the deference shown by other aliens. Marcus tracked the being through his scope, estimating range, wind conditions, and target movement patterns. One shot would eliminate the command, structure and throw their operation into confusion. But Marcus had learned patience during his years of military service. The first shot would announce his presence and bring retaliation against the colonists. He needed to wait for the right moment when maximum damage could be done with minimum risk to innocent people. The opportunity came when 3 transport ships arrived to begin loading the colonists. The aliens became focused on the logistical challenge of moving 300 people efficiently. Their attention was directed inward toward the immediate task, rather than outward toward potential threats. Marcus chambered around and settled into his firing position. The shot was challenging, but not impossible, 1,847 meters in moderate crosswind, with a target that moved periodically. He controlled his breathing, allowing his heart rate to settle into the steady rhythm that marked a professional at work. The alien commander moved into position, standing in profile as it supervised the loading process. Marcus placed the crosshairs carefully, compensating for wind drift and the slight downward angle of the shot. He exhaled slowly, finding the natural pause between breaths where the rifle would be most stable. The trigger broke with a crisp snap that Marcus felt more than heard. The heavy rifle round crossed the distance in less than 2 seconds, striking the alien commander center mass and dropping it instantly to the ground. The effect on the alien forces was immediate and dramatic. Soldiers that had been moving with calm efficiency suddenly began shouting in their incomprehensible languages. They raised their weapons and began scanning for threats, but they had no idea where the shot had originated. Marcus was already moving to his secondary position before the spent brass had finished falling. The first rule of sniper combat was never to fire twice from the same location. While the aliens searched frantically for his firing position, Marcus was slipping through terrain features that would keep him hidden from their sensors. The aliens made their third tactical error by clustering around their fallen commander, presenting multiple targets in a concentrated area. From his new position, Marcus had clear shots at 3 more targets. He took them methodically, one every 90 seconds, each shot dropping an alien soldier before the others could determine his location. After the 4th kill, the aliens began a more organized response. They spread out across the settlement, taking cover behind buildings and vehicles. Some began moving toward the hills where they believed the shots were originating. Marcus smiled grimly as he watched them through his scope. They were reacting exactly as he had hoped they would. The aliens were thinking conventionally, assuming they faced a conventional threat. They expected to find a sniper in a static position, perhaps with a spotter, operating like their own military doctrine would dictate. They did not understand that they were facing a human who had perfected the art of mobile warfare. Marcus began a systematic campaign of harassment that would have made his former instructors proud. He moved constantly, using natural terrain and his intimate knowledge of the area to stay ahead of alien search teams. Each new position gave him opportunities to engage targets of opportunity while remaining undetected. From a concealed position in a dry creek bed, Marcus eliminated 2 aliens who were attempting to set up some kind of sensor equipment. The range was only 600 meters, an easy shot that required minimal adjustment for wind or elevation. 20 minutes later, from a rocky depression overlooking the settlement's water treatment facility, he killed an alien technician who was attempting to sabotage the colonists' water supply. Marcus had realized that the aliens intended to make the settlement uninhabitable, forcing the humans to depend entirely on alien-controlled resources during their relocation. The pattern continued throughout the afternoon. Marcus would identify a target, move to an optimal firing position, take the shot, and immediately relocate before the aliens could respond. Each kill was surgical and precise, designed to degrade their operational capability. While avoiding any risk to the colonists, the aliens adapted their tactics as the day progressed. But they were always responding to Marcus's initiative rather than taking control of the tactical situation. They began moving in larger groups, making it harder for Marcus to isolate individual targets. They established overwatch positions and began using sensor drones to scan for threats, but Marcus had spent 15 years learning to defeat exactly these kinds of countermeasures. The sensor drones were susceptible to interference from the local magnetic anomalies that made Kepler unique. The overwatch positions were predictable once Marcus understood the aliens' tactical doctrine, and large groups, while harder to pick off individually, presented opportunities for psychological warfare. As evening approached, Marcus made his boldest move yet. The aliens had established a command post in the settlement's community center, thinking the building would provide protection from sniper fire. Marcus approached to within 300 meters, using storm drains and service tunnels that the aliens had not discovered. From a concealed position beneath the building's loading dock, Marcus could hear alien voices through the floor. They were arguing in their translated speech, their plans clearly disrupted by the day's losses. The morning sun cast long shadows across the small farming settlement of New Haven on the colony world of Kepler 442b. Sarah Shun Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she tended to the hydroponic gardens that fed most of the 300 colonists who called this place home. The vegetables grew in perfect rows under the controlled environment domes, a small miracle of human engineering on this distant world. Sarah had been up since dawn, as was her habit. At 34, she had the steady hands of someone who understood that patience and precision made the difference between a thriving crop and a failed harvest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her clothes were the simple, durable kind that frontier life demanded. She hummed quietly to herself as she checked the nutrient levels in the growing solutions. It was a song her grandmother had sung to her back on Earth, before the great expansion that scattered humanity across the galaxy. The melody carried memories of home. Even though New Haven had been her home for the past 8 years, the settlement was peaceful in the early morning light. Children would soon be heading to the small schoolhouse, and the farmers would begin their daily routines. New Haven was far from the busy trade routes and political centers of human space. That was exactly why she and her husband had chosen it. Marcus was still asleep in their small but comfortable home at the edge of the settlement. After 15 years of marriage, Sarah knew his patterns well. He would sleep until exactly 7:30, then wake without an alarm. He would make coffee for both of them, strong and black, and they would sit on their porch and watch the settlement come to life. Marcus Chun Martinez was a quiet man who spoke little about his past. Most of the colonists knew he had served in the military before coming to New Haven, but few knew the details. He was helpful when neighbors needed assistance with repairs or heavy work, but he kept to himself otherwise. Sarah understood this about him. Some experiences carve deep marks on a person's soul, marks that healed but never fully disappeared. What the other colonists did not know was that Marcus had served as a sniper with the 75th Ranger Regiment for 12 tours of duty across 4 different worlds. His longest confirmed kill was 3 kilometers, a shot that had saved an entire battalion from an ambush on the industrial world of Titan's Rest. The military had offered him commendations, promotions, and specialized assignments. But Marcus had turned them all down after meeting Sarah. He had told her once, during a quiet evening under Kepler's twin moons, that he had grown tired of taking lives. He wanted to build something instead of destroying it. Sarah had understood, and they had applied for colonial settlement together. The peace of the morning was broken by the deep rumble of engines overhead. Sarah looked up from her work to see shapes moving across the sky. At first, she thought they might be human transport ships, perhaps bringing supplies or new settlers. But as the shapes grew closer, she realized they were wrong somehow. The lines were too sharp, too angular for human design. Other colonists were emerging from their homes now, pointing at the sky. The ships were large, much larger than any civilian transport, and they moved with a precision that spoke of military purpose. As they descended toward the settlement, Sarah could see they were painted in colors she did not recognize: deep purple with silver markings that seemed to shift in the light. The ships landed in the central square of New Haven with a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Dust and debris swirled through the air as massive engines powered down. The colonists gathered at a safe distance, confused and worried. No one had expected visitors, especially not visitors in ships like these. A ramp descended from the largest vessel with a mechanical whir. The first beings to emerge were not human. They stood over 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and long arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. Their skin was a mottled gray-green color, and they wore armor that gleamed like polished metal. Most striking were their faces' elongated skulls with large, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Sarah had never seen their species before, but she recognized military bearing when she saw it. These beings moved with the disciplined precision of soldiers, their weapons held ready but not yet aimed at the colonists. The aliens were followed by smaller beings in different armor. These had blue-tinged skin and what looked like cybernetic implants along their necks and temples. Behind them came a third species, humanoid, but with features that reminded Sarah of reptiles more than mammals. At the rear of the group was a being that was clearly in command. It wore more elaborate armor with markings that probably indicated rank. When it spoke, its voice was translated by some kind of device that made it sound artificial and cold. "Citizens of this settlement," the commander announced, "you are now under the authority of the Hegemony Coalition. This world has been designated for resource extraction. You will gather your essential possessions and prepare for relocation." The colonists looked at each other in shock and confusion. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the settlement's elected leader, stepped forward. She was a small woman in her 60s, but she had the courage that came from a lifetime of facing difficult situations. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I think there's been some mistake. This is New Haven, a legally established human colony under the Colonial Settlement Act of 2387. We have full documentation and—" "Your human laws hold no authority here," the commander interrupted. "The Hegemony Coalition recognizes no human claims beyond your core systems. You have 1 hour to gather what you can carry. Transport ships will arrive shortly." The tension in the square was growing thicker. Sarah could see fear in the faces around her, but also anger. These people had worked hard to build New Haven. They had invested years of their lives, had raised families here, had put down roots in the alien soil of this distant world. "Where are you taking us?" Dr. Reeves asked. "We have children here, elderly people. Some of our colonists have medical conditions that require—" "That is not our concern," the commander said. Its voice carried no emotion, no recognition that it was talking about living beings. "You are being relocated to processing facilities where your labor will be assigned according to hegemony needs. Resistance will not be tolerated." Young Tom Bradley, barely 18 and full of the righteous fury of youth, stepped forward. "You can't just steal our home. We've done nothing wrong." Sarah saw what was about to happen a split second before it occurred. The alien commander raised what was clearly a weapon, some kind of energy rifle with a barrel that glowed with inner light. Tom was brave but foolish, and his outburst would cost him. Without thinking, Sarah moved forward, placing herself between Tom and the alien weapon. She raised her hands in a gesture she hoped would be understood as peaceful. "Please," she said. "He's just a boy. He's scared. We all are. If you'll give us a moment to understand what's happening." The weapon discharged with a sound like thunder and lightning combined. The energy beam struck Sarah in the chest, and she collapsed to the ground instantly. The smell of burned flesh and ozone filled the air. The square erupted into chaos. People screamed and ran. Some of the colonists rushed toward Sarah's fallen form, while others grabbed children and tried to find cover. The aliens raised their weapons, ready to fire again if anyone else showed defiance. Dr. Reeves knelt beside Sarah, checking for vital signs she knew she would not find. The young woman's eyes stared sightlessly at the alien sky, and her body was perfectly still. She had died instantly, killed for the crime of trying to protect a frightened boy. "You murdered her," Tom shouted, tears streaming down his face. "She was trying to help." The alien commander looked down at Sarah's body with what might have been curiosity. "She interfered with a lawful order. This is the consequence of resistance. Let her death serve as instruction to the rest of you." In their home at the edge of the settlement, Marcus Chun Martinez woke to the sound of energy weapons and screaming. His military training kicked in immediately, and he was moving toward his hidden weapon cache before he was fully conscious. But something else made him pause at the window. Sarah should have been back by now. She always returned from the gardens by this time, and they always had coffee together on the porch. The sounds of chaos from the settlement center made ice form in his stomach. Marcus grabbed his binoculars from the shelf and focused on the central square. What he saw through the magnified lenses changed everything. His wife lay motionless on the ground, surrounded by alien soldiers and panicking colonists. Even at this distance, Marcus could tell from the way her body lay that she was not injured. She was dead. The binoculars slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. For a moment that felt like forever, Marcus Chan Martinez could not breathe. The woman who had given his life meaning, who had shown him there was something worth building in the universe, was gone. The grief hit him like a physical blow, doubling him over. But beneath the grief, something else was awakening. Something he had tried to bury when he left. Military service behind, Marcus walked slowly to the hidden panel in their bedroom closet. Behind it was equipment he had hoped never to use again. His rifle case specially designed to prevent detection by most scanning systems. His rangefinder. His ammunition, each round hand-loaded for